The stories of renowned artists whose entire careers ended with a single decision, a single night, or a single line, music. They could never take back, range from riots and plane accidents to drunken remarks and intimate moments that went public. The Lorelei meltdown was Grace Slick. And the head of the Red Queen. Grace Slick was your high priestess if you were a child of the 1960s. This woman was the ultimate voice of the psychedelic movement. She was brave, astute, and totally in control when she stood at Woodstock and tore into White Rabbit. She seemed untouchable for a considerable amount of time. However, by 1978, something far more dangerous and sharp had taken the place of that previous glow of love and calm. She was leading Jefferson's Starship on a major tour of Europe. Additionally, the environment behind the scenes was extremely stressful, dark, and drenched in alcohol. They didn't simply fall apart when they got to Germany to perform at a big festival, they completely collapsed. Grace was unable to even reach the stage due to her extreme incapacity. Following a physical altercation between her husband and band members, the audience was so offended that they set fire to the stage. Music, you would assume that the ultimate wake-up call would be a riot and a real fire. However, the band made the decision to attempt to salvage the tour just 2 nights later. Grace was drinking backstage once more when a small spark started a full-scale explosion. In passing, someone remarked that she looked adorable in the milkmaid attire she had chosen. For whatever reason, that was the last straw, and she went into the dressing room to make a decision that would forever alter her life. She, of course, wore the complete uniform of, that fascist party headed by the man with the awful mustache when she came out onto a stage in Germany. I'm sure you understand what I mean. And she started making fun of the Second World War in front of a shocked and stunned crowd. I've frequently witnessed, singing, their style of music. Well, the line ended when the venue burst into anarchy for the second time in a week. She was promptly fired. The lady who had once defined a generation became an outsider in an instant. In a single night, one decision, one awful ensemble, and one awful joke, Grace Slick witnessed the instantaneous end of her career. The Secret Engagement, Donny Osmond. Singing in music, as the Osmonds' breakout star and co-host of Donny and Marie, Donny Osmond represented wholesome entertainment in the 1970s. Fan loyalty to him was almost religious. For millions of young females worldwide, he was the perfect boy next door, the purple-socked heartthrob, a clean-cut symbol of youth and innocence. The foundation of his career was a very particular, meticulously crafted promise that he was unreachable, available, and perpetually youthful. The music is secondary in the realm of teen idols. That's all there is to the fantasy. To rob my one and only dream of music and singing. However, as Donny grew older in the late 1970s, the limitations of that idealized boy image began to feel like a prison. You see, he had developed a strong romantic attachment to Debbie Glenn, a young lady. He was certain that he wanted to live out the rest of his days with her. This enormous, multi-million-dollar equipment behind him was the issue. His family and management were aware of the heartless reality of the business. A married idol is considered a retired idol in the realm of teen marketing. In order to safeguard the brand, the connection was kept a secret from the public and cameras for months. Music, young girl. Singing, however, Donny had had enough of leading 2 lives. He made the decision to take a risk. He had no idea that he was going to fall off a professional cliff. The official announcement of the engagement took place in 1978. For everyone else, it was a day of celebration and toasting, but not for Donny. No, not at all. Donny ought to have anticipated his admirers would be pleased for him. For a star, however, the reaction was much harsher. Complete, music, quiet. And the fantasy fell apart almost immediately. His fan correspondence. That, however, came to a complete stop. Tickets for concerts that used to sell out in a matter of seconds remained unpurchased at the box office. Singing, his relationship status had not simply changed. He had violated his audience's unwritten agreement. This one personal decision set off a protracted gloomy period in which Donny Osmond was shunned by the music industry. The happily ever after can be the kiss of death for a teen idol, as evidenced by the fact that he was finally obliged to release songs anonymously in order to gain a fair hearing on the radio. Leif Garrett, the violent dancing on his birthday. Music. In 1978, it was impossible to look through a magazine without coming across the feathered hair. He was all over the place. Teen Idol's unchallenged ruler. A young person earning a substantial income but still residing at home. He was promoted as the ideal golden boy, the next big thing that would make parents feel secure. Music. The next Donny Osmond, you know. However, things were already becoming somewhat disorganized when removed from the TV displays and posters. LA was partying hard, hanging around with older Hollywood people, and engaging in activities that were inappropriate for teenagers. I'm thinking of Music, you. 5 days before he turned 18, I believe the beach and that way of life quickly caught up with him on a dark California road. Roland Winkler, Leaf's best buddy, was riding shotgun behind him as he drove his Porsche. Like many young celebrities, he pushed the automobile harder than he should have because he felt unbeatable. It only took one wrong turn. Leaf became uncontrollable. Music. The night was permanently altered when the car flew off a 60-foot slope. Leaf managed to escape unharmed, but upon turning around, he discovered his closest companion buried beneath the debris. Although Roland lived, he was left paraplegic for the remainder of his life. Furthermore, Leaf's future and reputation would never be the same. Music. The crash followed Leaf everywhere after that. He was often reminded of his pal and the Twisted Metal. And no one that young could cope with the shame. He became more involved with the same drugs that had previously been a part of his existence. I believe that he is already attempting to dismantle his life in order to silence the responsibility and the memories. Decades of addiction and severe health issues ensued. A protracted battle that was all connected to music on that one tragic night. The head sabotage, the Monkees. Primates. Music. By 1968, the Monkees had become a billion-dollar phenomenon. However, they had had enough of being treated like a manufactured good. They had waged a fierce struggle to compose their own music and play their own instruments. The Prefab 4 label, however, continued to follow them around. They were confined to a bubblegum pop-filled plastic cage. And they concluded that they had to systematically destroy the very image that brought them fortune if they were to be taken seriously by the emerging psychedelic counterculture. To do this, they decided to make a full film called Head, which is a daring and ultimately fatal approach. They worked with a young Jack Nicholson, and the band's goal was to produce an album that would brutally dismantle their own reputation. Hey, what's wrong? What's the matter? I questioned you initially. Nothing. This is not what I ordered. The movie was a non-linear hallucinogenic journey that made fun of their marketing, their TV show, and, regrettably, even their fans. With this dark experimental change, they were sure they would gain the respect of the cool underground community they so badly wanted. This movie's late 1968 release was a historic tactical catastrophe. Younger fans of the band were unaware that they were featured in the movie because of the bizarre cryptic marketing. A movie starring a TV band, however, was rejected by the older serious rock audience. A complete commercial blackout was the outcome. Not only did the Monkees fail to attract new viewers, they alienated and appalled the one they had. Their TV show had vanished by the time the dust settled. Their record sales had plummeted. And one 90-minute act of creative sabotage had destroyed the band's empire. The Brotherly Break, Creedence Clearwater Revival. Music. CCR felt unstoppable for a few scorching years in the late 1960s and early 1970s, like a band designed to consistently produce classic American rock songs. They were playing hits, such as Fortunate Son and Proud Mary, so quickly that it seemed automatic, anthem after anthem. John Fogerty, who composed the songs, oversaw the production, and tightly controlled every creative choice, was at the core of it all. Tom, his elder brother, had been present from the start. However, when the band's popularity skyrocketed, that equilibrium subtly changed against them. Bring a nickel back here, music. His own brother and the other members of the group soon began to feel more like hired help than collaborators. Additionally, the tension had been growing for a considerable amount of time by 1971. At last, Tom had reached his breaking point. It was hard to ignore the pressure on their family ties as he was treated like a sideman in the band he helped start. Tom reached the end of his rope after a heated practice. He made no effort to bargain or request more authority. He simply left and permanently left the band. In response, John encouraged the remaining members to compose and perform original songs for the upcoming album because he took the departure very personally. It was almost like a test to see if the band could play without him making all of the decisions. Music, well, CCR's incredible momentum was quickly destroyed when that album, Marty Girl, was met with negative reviews and a lackluster reception from fans. The breakup in 1972 didn't halt the harm, though. Decades of litigation and unresolved resentment followed Tom's departure. The arguments persisted even after Tom's death, with John suing his former bandmates to music stop them from playing under the Creedence's name. A band didn't just end when one brother left. It started a protracted, agonizing conflict that demonstrated how CCR never quite recovered from its cracks. The American bandstand is Syd Barrett. Music, Pink Floyd was formed by the stunning avant-garde genius Syd Barrett. He was responsible for creating a hallucinogenic dreamscape on the London Underground. However, due to extensive LSD usage, Syd's mental state was deteriorating as the band got ready for their first American tour in 1967. Their entire future hinged on a successful promotional run in the United States, starting with a prominent performance on American Bandstand. The man was a ghost in his own band. The music director motioned for Syd's close-up as the cameras began to roll for their See Emily Play performance. The audience, music, waited for the charismatic leader to take the lead as the music began and the lyrics began to take shape. However, the world witnessed Syd Barrett's exact departure from the building as the camera focused in. He didn't sing. He made no attempt to move his lips. Music, he didn't even give the studio credit. He just stood there with a scary, empty, music gaze that demonstrated his detachment from reality. David Gilmour took Syd Barrett's position after he was sacked a few weeks later. Syd remained a loner for the remainder of his life. The churchy tragedy, Keith Moon. Music, singing, Keith Moon seemed for years to be the type of rock star that nothing could possibly surpass. He was, after all, the human firecracker behind the drum kit, Moon the Lawn. Transforming each performance into a spectacle and each offstage incident into a tale that would be told for years. By 1970, his crazy reputation seemed to be set in stone. He lived for the laugh, the joke, the pandemonium. However, music came to a horrifying stop one night outside a pub in the sleepy village of Chizey. A gang of irate skinheads abruptly surrounded Keith's car as he got inside, rocking it, yelling threats, and trapping him in a rapidly escalating situation. Music, overwhelmed and in a panic, Keith took the only action his terrified brain could think of. He tried to flee by getting behind the wheel. Regretfully, he lacked a license and was intoxicated. But when he hit the accelerator, adrenaline took over. The automobile raced forward into the darkness and he felt a heavy thud in the pandemonium, but he continued. Keith eventually halted miles later, certain that he had escaped the crowd. And his world fell apart when the cops showed there and told him what had really transpired. He had struck someone who wasn't in the crowd. It was Neil Boland, a longtime friend and bodyguard. Of course, Keith was never quite free of that time. Everywhere he went, the guilt of, I suppose, unintentionally killing someone he loved followed him, music, gradually eroding him. As he attempted to hide a reality from which he was unable to escape, his drug and alcohol abuse grew worse. And the wild, endearing chaos that people loved started to turn into something much more harmful and sinister. Not only did that night in Churchy put an end to the pleasure, but it also set off a chain of events that finally lost rock and roll one of its most enduring figures. Music, the Columbus Incident, Elvis Costello. Music, Elvis Costello was rock's most irate young man by March 1979. Armed Forces, Music, the lyrical mastermind's third album, recently made it into the US Top 10. The man was about to become a superstar. However, he was deliberately undermining his own achievements behind the scenes. Driven by a perilous combination of drug misuse and a wish to undermine the same respect he had battled to gain. At a Holiday Inn bar in Columbus, Ohio, that tension, music, finally broke out. The conflict between the new wave and the old guard of rock took place late at night. Backup vocalist Bonnie Bramlett was among the members of Stephen Still's touring group that Costello and his band encountered. Costello became more and more irritable as the drinks came in, insulting everything that was American. He was searching for the most damaging way to conclude the argument, whether it was about the nation itself or icons like Buddy Holly and Elvis Presley. Music. Costello withdrew his tongue from his thoughts when Bramlett questioned him about James Brown and Ray Charles. "Your radio style." He used the same vile racial epithet to denigrate both images. An insult so heinous that it quickly escalated a verbal altercation into a physical altercation. It was not merely a professional fallout. It happened quickly and violently. The renownedly tough Bramlett pushed Costello from his bar stool. Additionally, he was subjected to a barrage of death threats, picketing by the shows, and a record label that almost dropped him as it was revealed that the golden boy of the critics had suddenly become a national outcast. Costello would later reflect that the episode probably saved his life by removing him from a deadly circle of fame before it was too late, even though it threw his career off course and pushed him into years of image rehabilitation. The quotation from John Lennon is greater than that of Jesus. Music. Imagine being so well known that everyone would simply nod if you said, "Music, anything." That was the Beatles back in 1966. They were living in this bubble where, music, they could do no wrong. The one who always pushed the boundaries was John Lennon. He's sitting in his living room one afternoon, drinking tea and chatting casually with a reporter he knew fairly well. As they discussed how the world was moving away from traditional customs, John pointed out that his band's impact was growing while faith appeared to be contracting. In London, however, it was simply interpreted as John's philosophical nature. There wasn't much of a commotion over it. However, months later, when that interview eventually reached the American South, the response was sufficient to halt the biggest heartthrobs in the world in their tracks. Boy, that quote was all over the place. John had claimed that Jesus was less well-liked than the Beatles. The mop-top era ended almost immediately, and a surge of unadulterated animosity took its place. There were radio stations advocating for large bonfires in which children were urged to burn their posters and records. The most heinous organization in history, the Klan, was even demonstrating against their performances. Additionally, the band had moved past their concern for the charts by the time they arrived in the United States for their 1966 tour. Snipers were their concern. Eventually, during a set in Memphis, everything fell apart. A tremendous crack ripped through the stadium air in the middle of a song. The band came to a complete halt. They all stared at John, confident that they were seeing his last moments on the planet. Yes, that trigger had been pulled at last. Music. Well, as it happened, someone had thrown a firecracker into the stage. However, the worry was genuine. An era came to an end in that moment of genuine horror. After completing the tour and performing one last gig in San Francisco, they left. Because of a single remark said over tea in a London flat, they made the decision to permanently retire from the stage, or at least jointly, silencing the largest touring act in history, music. The Dallas Highway Escape, Ike and Tina Turner. Music. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, the Ike and Tina Turner concert was an unstoppable force on the charts, a high-octane soul machine. Although the world witnessed a formidable pair, the reality within their close circle was a nightmare. Ike Turner had used financial seclusion and relentless physical, music, torture to keep Tina completely under control for almost 20 years. The records were marketed by her voice, her legs, and her face. She didn't even have the rights to her own name, so she was effectively a prisoner. The strain had reached a deadly breaking point by the time they arrived in Dallas in July of 1976. On the way to their hotel, an explosion occurred in the rear of a limousine. Music. Tina was worn out and battered after the violent, bloody altercation. However, something inside eventually became frigid for the first time in 20 years. "That's how you're speaking to me? What do you say? Please don't begin with me. I don't feel like it today." "Okay." As soon as they arrived at the hotel, Ike fell asleep, leaving Tina by herself with her image in the mirror. Her existence had reduced to a scary binary, she knew at that very moment. She probably wouldn't make it through the year if she remained in that room till he woke up. Tina grabbed for the door after waiting for his breathing to become very steady. Music. Tina Turner sneaked out into the Texas heat and started running with just 36 cents and a petrol station credit card in her pocket. She didn't simply leave. In the middle of the night, she found herself standing at the edge of a huge multi-lane expressway. She took a breath, then ran across the lanes, evading traffic to get to the safety of Aroma on the other side while cars screamed by her in the dark. The Tina brand was instantly and violently destroyed by that sprint across the highway at midnight. That night, in that hotel room in that vehicle, their joint career came to an end. But as she crossed the street, Tina Turner became a solo legend, and the world saw it happen. The brilliant. At last, emerging from a gloom that nearly cost her everything. Music, it truly strikes you how, quickly things can change when you hear these stories back to back. The entire future can go awry in a single night, one sentence, and one poor choice. You've lost all you worked so hard for. Nobodies, these were not. These were the bands, the voices, and the faces that seemed to be a part of our regular, lives. And many of us were impacted by witnessing it all unfold in real time. When everything went wrong, some people managed to return, some never did, and some were permanently frozen. We therefore urgently need to hear from you, the fans. What is your favorite memory of these moments? When you hear about music, which ones kind of surprise you? Did any of these setbacks alter your subsequent perception of the music or the performer? Music, please share your thoughts with me in the comment box. Reflections on the tales I shared, as well as perhaps another case of a brilliant artist who made a grave error. Please click the like button if you liked the video. Thank you very much. Additionally, make sure you have a subscription so you never miss a memory or a video. Most importantly, though, thank you so much for watching from the entire Do You Remember team. Keep the record rolling till the next time, and perhaps remind yourself of how slender the line is between silence and superstardom.